Mike Colechin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, would you like to introduce yourself for the listeners at home? Who are you? What do you do? Take it away.
Okay, Mike Colechin. I run a small, what I describe normally as a research innovation consultancy, but basically it was a company I set up to allow me to carry on doing the things I have been doing for some time in a broader industry context. So, by background, I'm a combustion engineer. Spent quite a lot of my quite a proportion of my early career working for Powergen and then Eon on large fossil-fired power stations. And as part of that, then became more and more involved in the renewable sector in the form of biomass. So did a lot of work on biomass combustion and finished up heading up the R&D activities in the UK for Eon on biomass. Which is I'm saying that because it loops back round to something I've been doing recently in the work I'm doing today, and then as time went on, I became more and more involved in R&D management. Was supported our chief executive for Eon UK when he was involved as the first co-chair of the Energy Research Partnership when that was set up way back in 2005. So it's just about to have its 20th birthday. So I did that. Because of that, I also got involved in the setting up of the Energy Technologies Institute, which Eon was a partner member of when it was first set up. I managed Eon's membership of that organisation for a few years and then jumped the fence and went and worked there. So for the second half of the ETI's life. So ETI was set up for 10 years. And I was actually part of the organisation for the second half of that. And then when that came to an end in around 2017, 2018, as I say, I wanted to carry on doing the same sort of things and decided that actually it was time to sort of try and do it on my own. And I have been ever since. So I'm now 7 years in, almost 8 years in to running my own business. We were just chatting before the program started. It's not the easiest thing to do, running your own business, but it's great fun, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I mean, the great thing is that people do pay us because there's a team of us now to do things that I'm really interested in doing, and that's primarily looking at actually how we achieve impact from research and innovation in the low carbon energy area. So a lot of work with academics, but also right across the private public sectors as well.
Brilliant. Oh, well, that's a brilliant introduction. I would have never done you justice, so I'm glad you could introduce yourself there. So obviously you work closely with universities and industry, and you seem to really have your finger on the pulse with those low carbon innovations and technology. What does it take to really turn cutting edge innovations into real world impact for things like net zero, in your experience?
I think the perhaps slightly trite answer to that is you've got to have something that works. But I think also you've got to have something that people find appealing. And I think there are all sorts of reasons that people find it appealing. And you also need to think about who you mean by people in there as well. Because yes, there's something about the end users, the people who are most impacted by the decisions of things that are done and the systems that change. So general public is important in all of this, but equally so are the opinions of people like decision makers and investors, because they're looking to understand what's going to make commercial sense. Or indeed what's going to make political sense. So, some of these decision makers will be government officials or elected governments, and they will be looking for people to vote for them. So there's all sorts of levels at which these things are important. And I think in there becomes this question of value, which of the solutions you might adopt are going to deliver value, and then you start sort of saying, well, and what do you mean by value? So if you're saying actually what we want to do is tackle climate change, then yes, we've got to remove CO2 emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, sorry, from human activity. That
Yeah.
that's part of the science. We've got to get there. Um, but what? So that's one value these solutions bring. But then, of course, there's always the challenge that the trilemma still sits there. So you've got, yes, you want to do the sustainability thing, but you've also got to deal with costs. You've got to deal with the impact that those costs have on people. So how do you avoid driving people into poverty because of the solutions you're adopting? Um, and on the other side, you've got the issues of security, and of course, a lot of this is about an energy system, and it's how do you ensure that people can access the services that they want, and at the times they need them. I think it's that sort of so there's issues in there of wants and needs, and that sort of takes you into areas of which solutions will we adopt. Well, it'll also be something about the things that perhaps make life a bit easier for us. It's there's a pushback, I think, against things that seem like they just drive things in a negative direction. And I think one of the challenges we've got at the moment with all of this, the whole public discourse around net zero, which I think there is quite a discourse in that area at the moment, and it can be quite negative. And I think part of the problem in there is that we've tended to be continually selling this as something that we've got to do, that we've got to suffer, we've got to, and and we're not always finding the ways of getting people to engage positively in the process, and
Mm.
see that it's actually will improve their lives or find ways in which it can improve their lives. So and in there, and I think this is what you see with some of the so it's very easy as a bunch of I've spent most of my life as an engineer working with engineers, and it's very tempting as engineers to build big models and optimize things and say, well, here's the answer because my model says here's the best solution and I've optimized everything, and therefore we should do this because this is the right answer. And I always want to sort of ask in that situation, well, yeah, okay, but right for who? Because that
Mm.
might be the right answer from the perspective of an energy system that is only delivering energy to people, but that energy system doesn't serve itself. It's about serving a much broader economy, and it's that thinking about how that broader economy, that broader society even, is impacted by that system. So,
Mm.
you know, the debate between do you use hydrogen or do you electrify everything? Um, well, okay, in different locations, the answer to that might be different because of the jobs that are involved. So
Mm.
if you've got a location that's sort of, I don't know, got a lot of people who've worked in oil and gas, maybe hydrogen would work in those locations because there's a ready workforce there that can deliver it.
Mm.
And, and I'm not for a moment there suggesting hydrogen is the answer. But I think there are processes in these decisions we make about which is the way forward for things that are influenced by issues well outside of the engineering and the engineering optimum. So I have no question in my mind as an engineer that hydrogen actually loses a lot of energy in making it and then taking it back to whatever form you're going to use that energy in. But there are plenty of other examples in society of where we do what, from an engineering perspective, is slightly less than optimum, but we do it because that's the way society's developed. So I think we have to think about those issues as well. And there's a lot in
Ah.
there around unintended consequences and the consequences of the decisions we make and what that means down the line. Um,
Mm.
and I can illustrate with that with a few other examples of things I've been working on recently, if that's helps. But that's maybe
Yeah,
more than enough. I don't know.
yeah, but I mean, I think you've given a lot of detail there in terms of what value you're actually adding. Where it's almost horses for courses, you were saying, isn't it? It's you need to meet the solution and meet the problem with the solution rather than having a solution that you apply to all the problems. Um, Brilliant. You also mentioned in there about. Sorry, did you want to come back on that?
Well, yeah, you triggered something else that I was going to talk about. There is the whole that, as well as meeting the problem with a solution, it's also meeting the problem with a solution that others can understand, and the people who are going to adopt that solution drive it forward. So decision
Mm,
makers, investors, the people who are going to use the solutions in the end, and particularly for the decision making process, there's that need for evidence as well. So being and I think this is where and I think this is where sometimes the various communities I engage with don't always recognise the value they bring to one another. And particularly for me, working quite a lot with the academic sector, there's a tendency, particularly among engineers within the academic sector, to be saying, "Oh well, can we find the next great solution?" Without
mm,
recognizing that actually they've got a lot of knowledge that to bring into the situation now around sort of providing evidence for why the solutions that are here now could be adopted and what it is that's needed to take them forward, and making sure that as those are taken forward that we solve the problems that we're going to encounter as they get implemented. So for me at the minute, research and innovation is not about finding that sort of I don't know. I don't like the term golden silver bullet, but people are forever looking for the next solution. Well, hang on a minute. That next solution in energy system terms is going to be the end of the century before we're really implementing it. We've got to get on and solve this problem now, which means we need to engage now with the solutions we've got. Look back 50
mm,
years, or sorry, look back 25 years, because we've got 25 years to do this in. Look back 25 years and look at what was coming on into the system in 25 years ago in terms of the solutions, and now play that forward and think how we've taken those forward in that time. The things that are now here, we knew about 25 years ago. It wasn't sort of things we hadn't invented yet. It was stuff we knew about. And the really key thing is then doing the things that make those roll out at scale and allow us to make sure they become almost ubiquitous parts of the system. And that's about engaging now in quite a short and an iterative way, understanding where the problems are and helping to solve those problems rather than going off and trying to find the next best great answer.
yeah,
I would suggest.
yeah, brilliant. So, um, very much linked to that. You and I met at the Centre of Doctoral Training for Resilient Decarbonised Fuel Energy Systems. Myself as a student, you were well. It was when you were first showing us your board games as um, part of the first year induction, I believe it was. But you also sit on the industry advisory group. Are you the chair, the head of the board now, right?
I chair the advisory
You
board.
chair.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Yeah. Um, so how do centers of doctoral training kind of play into this bridge between academics and industry? How do you see them playing a role in creating that evidence that you were just speaking about?
Yeah. I mean, I think a really crucial role for centres for doctoral training is that training of the next generation of scientists and engineers that are gonna keep us working on these issues and taking them forward. But I mean, maybe come back to that. I think to answer your question directly, there, I think it's that relationship between the academic sector, the researchers, and the other stakeholders who need to be able to access that research. And I'm being quite deliberate with my words there because it's not just about industry; it's about a range of organisations. So, I mean,
Mm.
I'm involved in. I actually really believe in centres for doctoral training. I think they are a very effective way of moving things forward. One of the centres I work with, um, every student in that centre, which isn't quite the same as RDFES, but one of the centres I work with, every student in that centre, it's the offshore renewables one,
Mm.
um, has a sponsor. So they basically join the centre, do a year of training, and really sort of it's a tough year they do, of solid training in offshore renewable technologies, and then they do a 3-year research project.
Got you.
But they're not matched to their sponsors until towards the end of that first year of training. So you
Wow.
don't go in knowing who your sponsor's going to be, um, which is quite an interesting process. But once you do know who your sponsor is, you're working with them for the next 3 years, and that creates a relationship that it's a bit like gold dust. It's sort of because it really helps the students, or the research engineers, as they're called on that program, to put their work, or their learning and their training into a practical context. But the message we always get back from the sponsors as well is that it's really great because those students, those research engineers, hit the ground running. They know what they're doing when they come and join us. We're not. It's not like having a placement student from university. It's like having a really well trained engineer who understands the technologies we're working on. So we're able to get them to engage very quickly in the things we need them to do. But it gives them direct access into that academic capability in the form of the supervisors that are supporting them. And I think that sort of, I don't for 1 minute suggest that's the only way to do PhD level training, but it's a very effective way of building that relationship between academia and the organisations, the range of organisations that are working in that, energy and decarbonisation space. And I've seen the same. I personally have sponsored now 2 students under the CDC that you're part of, Ben, and I'm about to sponsor a 3rd student under another CDT, and that for me has been brilliant because it's a great way of me engaging with people as they're in their early career, of supporting them as they do that, of encouraging them that this is a place to be and to work despite all its frustrations and well, yeah, sometimes it gets quite depressing working in this space. But equally, it really gives people that chance to sort of develop and grow. And I think the other thing for me in the sort of business I have is that it also gives me access to resource, which, relatively speaking, is low cost from my perspective, but very very high class and very effective resource. And yeah, what's not to like about that, really?
Yeah.
Um, and I guess the other thing in there is that then also some of the centres do have a sort of more standard PhD offering. I mean, I know RDFES, for instance, does have a more standard PhD offering within it. Not everyone goes out and works in their sponsoring company, and I definitely I believe quite passionately that has a really important role to play. I think the other important thing in there, though, is that this area, the area of energy and decarbonisation, needs people with PhD level qualifications within it. And I think that the knowledge and the capability and the understanding that you develop during a program of the sort that comes from being part of a centre for doctoral training means that you're more ready to deliver into the system at the end of that time than maybe going in as a graduate. And I think there's a tendency, I think, for people to look at a PhD level qualification and say, "Oh, that's me becoming an academic." Whereas my experience of working with people, well, even back from my own days doing a PhD, which was a more standard approach, of my peers from that time and watching people go through the CDCs, the number of people who actually stay in academia is pretty low. And if you look at the pull through, the ratios, how many profs are there out there as against how many people do PhDs, it's there isn't a huge pull through in academia. There's not a lot of space to go to. But that doesn't mean a PhD qualification is not valuable, because I really do believe it is. I really do believe it makes a difference. The other thing about the CDTs, and the other big thing about all of the projects I've sponsored so far is, the student I'm sponsoring at the moment is an engineer by training, but he's not doing an engineering project. Every project I've sponsored has been one that's had sort of some element of interdisciplinarity about it, and particularly looking at the sort of the social science of how we make this change happen. How do we get to net zero? And that sort of, how do you bring the social science, the government, the understanding of politics, the understanding of how people behave and respond, alongside the engineering to drive us towards the solutions that we need. And I think that's another important thing, which I think is, and that's not dependent upon Centres for Doctoral Training, but Centres for Doctoral Training do give the opportunity to make that happen. And that's why I keep talking about, it's not just about industry, it's about public sector organisations as well. And there's a good number of public and other third sector organisations that are involved with these CDTs.
Bro.
Okay.
So I think we've covered the collaboration area of your work. I'd love to move on to you being a co-founder of a board game venture, which I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in. Would you mind describing that, what it does, what are the games, and how do they help the stakeholders think differently?
Okay. So the joint venture is called Heuristic. It's something that I set up with a former colleague from my Eon days. And it came out of me doing some work with a Centre for Doctoral Training. And I used to do a lecture for them each year about the development of innovation in the energy sector. And the team that Andy, my colleague, used to work in, used to deliver a game that had been developed in Eon, which was around how electricity markets work. And it was something that Andy had been involved with developing when he was running that team. And they, because of the way things developed in Eon decided not to deliver this anymore. And so the chap who was running this course came to me and says, "Mike, do you know anyone who could deliver this workshop for us or something similar?" And just coincidentally, Andy and I had been having a conversation, because by this time Andy had also moved on and had just set up his own consultancy, the same as me. And I was having a chat with him. Could we resurrect? Could we redo and redevelop, reinvent what we now call Power Trader? And we decided we could. And then when it was Mark Jepson from Loughborough University came to us and asked this question, I said, "Yes, we can. We'll do it." And so we did. And we created a sort of, I wouldn't describe it as a board game. I describe what we do as facilitated workshops. I think if you think there was a board game, you'd think of something you can hand over in a box and people can play it. Our workshops don't work like that. We'd like to think we could do that because I'm sure you'd make a lot more money out of selling a board game. But then there'd be lots of competition for it as well. Whereas
Yeah.
what we do, I think, is relatively unique.
Mm.
And so, yeah, we developed this you know, reinvented this sort of process that was purely physical at the time. You know, you had cards and you traded them, and you got stamps, and we had tokens for the representing power, and then COVID hit. So, just before COVID hit, we'd gone on and created two further workshops. So one around transport planning, and one around impact in the academic sector, really for early career researchers. And those were just, transport plan was the one we were really working on and just about got ready. It was ready to commercially launch, and then COVID hit. 2 years of nobody meeting anyone else in a room anywhere. So facilitated workshops that bring people together in a room don't really work. But because by then we'd built up a bit of a following for the power trade workshop, we had a few clients who came to say, "Can you do anything online?" So we did. We spent quite a bit of time. First of all, doing something in Google Sheets, which worked very effectively, but very clunkily, and was quite hard to get the sort of you could get people to interact, but in the way that we did in the room. And then we decided that actually the best way of solving that was to develop a web app, which we did with the help of with Andy's son, actually, who had been a lighting and sound technician prior to COVID, but of course he had no work when COVID came along. So he had already started retraining himself in sort of programming web apps, and so helped us develop the platform we now use for the power trader workshops. And that continues to be, and we still use that. So we like to, and you've seen, because you've done the workshops with us, you've seen that sort of interaction in the room. We much prefer to be in the room with people, although because we've now got an online offering for power trader, we have delivered workshops internationally. So we did a workshop for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, where we have people from embassies all around the world dialing in
Cool.
and playing
Cool.
the game together. That developed that, and we still use that web app in, as I say, when we're in the room. And we use it. We use it as a tool to show people how different aspects. So each of our workshops looks at a different aspect of the systems, the way that you go about decarbonising an economy. So Power Trader focuses on the electricity system, looks at the way energy gets traded within that electricity system, but then thinks about what's going to happen in the future. And this is a feature of all of our workshops, is that we'll set something up, we'll get people to sort of engage with something, and then we'll use that to explore, right, what happens on the journey to 2050. And it's really interesting because one of the other ones who developed this one called Transport Planner, people look at that when you first get out in the room, particularly if you've got a bunch of engineers who, as your colleagues, we've done it with. I can't remember whether you've done that one, but certainly
I've done Transport Planner. I think that was my favorite one of all of them. I really enjoyed it. I'm playing with all the bits and bobs.
So you bring this out in the room, and then sort of a bunch of people who are not doing anything to do with transport really, and they're going, "What's this for? Why are you getting us to do something?" And you sort of teach them the game, you get them working with it. So like within a round, they know what they're doing. And then we start building in the challenges and demonstrating how transport planning links very much with the energy system, but also we use it to explore policy. So the implications of implementing policy at a local and a national level, and how that plays through. And I think it becomes really useful for people to in a step out of the world in which they live. So if you're working research on carbon capture and storage, and you start talking about policy, you'll be blinkered into saying, well, actually, all the policy has got to enable and support carbon capture and storage because that's what I want policy to do. Whereas if you give them something in a world in which they understand, because everyone travels, so everyone understands transport systems, and you set up this sort of model of a city and people, and now you say, right, now you've got some policy levers. How are you going to pull them, and where are you going to pull them, and what impact does that have? Oh, and what are the implications down the line for, so you've decided you're going to, I don't know, invest in trams, and then you put your trams in the wrong place, and all the people move to another part of the city. And yeah, that so you get people to reflect in a more, perhaps a more objective way about the implications of those sort of issues, and that's something we then try to take to another level with the last 2 years we've spent developing a new workshop which we launched and delivered commercially for the first time a couple of months ago, and we're going through the process now of sort of doing a bigger launch of that and pushing it out into the world, sort of and publicising it. But that's one that so Zach, who's the student at Sponsor Moment on the CDT you're in, as part of his data collection, we decided we were going to develop this game, which is designed to get people to explore the complexity of relationships within the economy that impact how we move towards net zero. So we basically base it on the future energy scenarios that National Grid, now NESO, developed, and put all of the different technologies and solutions in a sort of in a box, and then let people choose which ones they want to try and implement. And you've got teams there, teams that are representing industry, teams representing households, local authorities, and the power sector, and then you've got a team representing government. And the only team in the game with the objective of achieving net zero is the team representing government. Everyone else has other objectives, because you're then playing this idea of these people with different objectives will see life in a different way. So when you say, oh, we want to give everyone a heat pump, the households go, well, that's okay, but I like gas boilers, so why would I want a heat pump? And you then got to sort of try and show them and persuade them, and it gets the really interesting. So all of our workshops lead to discussion, and that's what we want to happen. We want people to talk and learn from one another as much as they learn from us. But that game, you have to cut across. We have a bell to mark the changes in rounds. Most times, all that does is mark the change in rounds. For that workshop, you have to ring it, because you've got to interrupt the conversation that's going on, because people get so into the conversation about, well, how would this, what happens here? Does it really, what's the, and all the debates that are going on in the room, and all those. So it really does get people to see that complexity, but in a simple way that they can get their heads around and then start reflecting on subsequently.
Definitely.
And
I
that's
think
what we want to do with those workshops. That's why we do them. And
yeah. I think we played that one at the Knowledge Exchange group, didn't we, at the keg? With the
when
CDT.
we were first developing it, Zach said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I've got a group who'll help us do this." So.
It was absolutely brilliant. Everyone who's listening, if you're interested, definitely get in touch with Mike and get organising with that, because I had an absolutely amazing time. I've never been more engaged in a game, especially around net zero, and it was absolutely brilliant. Can't recommend it enough. But why do you think this kind of stakeholder engagement is so effective? Why did people get so into it?
I think it's about taking people to a different place. So I think so much of the discourse, the discussion, you're engaging with an intellectual level. It's about knowledge and people talking to one another about what knowledge they have about different things. Whereas if you go to a space in which you're playing, and if you get a game, if you've got a game in the room, you are playing to some extent, and you're allowed to role play as well. So, I mean, the first time we ran decarbonation for a sort of fee paying group, one of the people in the room was a count worked for a local authority, and she was going around saying, "Right, today I'm an industrialist and I just want share price." She says, "None of you will believe this if you know me, because this is not the way I. But today I'm maximising my share price." And she got into that role. That's what she did all day long, and really loved doing it. But she could do that, and it allowed her to take a different perspective on life, but also in the back of her mind, she still had the beliefs. So she was exploring her own beliefs about the way the world works, but doing it in a playful and different way. And I think what you're creating, you create a safe space as well to allow you to explore ideas, allow you to get it wrong. And for that not to be a problem. I think so often in a meeting you're sort of always sort of saying, all right, well, I've got to get this exactly right. I've got to be talking from a position of knowledge because everyone's going to be judging my knowledge in this situation. Whereas if you're playing and you get it wrong, well, that's just the way the game worked, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But you've engaged in it, and you're thinking about, oh, right, well, how do I behave normally in this situation, and what are my beliefs about this? So you get to a much deeper place of, and I think more learning comes out of that, but also um, a more effective understanding of how the world works, and more honest and open strategic engagement between people, which is sort of what we're trying. So we deliver the workshops to sort of three different types of client. Really, we deliver them to, as we've done with your groups, sort of where you're sort of offering a sort of training element and showing people some new ideas and new concepts. We've delivered it for people for their Christmas parties. So there's a few companies who have come to us and wanted to do sort of some sort of event which is sort of relevant to what their business is, but something that's a bit fun. So we've done that.
Nice.
But then we also, and as was the case with the example I was just talking about, where you've got a bunch of stakeholders, you bring them together to explore an area, an issue that they're working on, and to understand their positions. So part of what we did in those workshops, so we'd run around at the workshop, and then we'd have a conversation where we'd capture people's views on particular issues, and we found that's sort of quite an effective way of just having a deeper conversation.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. So moving on a bit, I love that bit, the discussion we've just had. I love the games and the workshops. So that was more for me than anyone else. Moving on a bit to skills and the next generation of engineers. We kind of alluded to it a bit earlier, but what
Yeah.
skills do the next generation of engineers and also social scientists will say as well now, because you mentioned those as well. What kind of skills are needed for the next generation in the next 25 years to really push for net zero and to achieve it?
Yeah. I mean, the answer there has to be diverse skills, because it's not, I mean, the thing we've just been talking about there, it's not about one solution and everyone just working on one solution. It's about how we bring a range of solutions together and how we implement them in a complex societal context. So yes, you definitely need people working on some really deep, tough engineering and science and solving the problems we're going to hit. So what, which solvents are we going to use if we actually get CCS away commercially, and actually how we're going to deal with the problems when those solvents get poisoned, and you need people who can answer those questions. How do you store it and keep it down there in the geology if you're doing that CO2 capture? How do you keep your offshore wind farms running for the whole of their design life and longer? How do you extend that life? How are you dealing with that on a day-to-day basis in terms of operations and maintenance? And so, there's a whole raft of skills here, running from technician level all the way through to sort of PhD and CDT type level, and all of those things I've just been talking about are things that I have seen people in CDT projects working on.
Mm.
So it's diverse. And as you rightly point out, it's not just about engineering, it's an interdisciplinary problem. And it's getting people from across a wide range of disciplines to really engage with the issues and
Mm.
build the evidence and give the answers when people are looking for them. So when investors are looking to understand where their money goes next, and where are governments and their policies and strategies heading, and what does that mean in terms of where do I invest, and when does that investment become a stranded asset,
Mm.
and how do I avoid that happening? All of those sort of questions are ones that the community needs to be in a position to answer, and therefore developing the skills to be able to answer those questions is really valuable. I guess the challenge in there as well, though, is that the sector is changing and changing rapidly. Um, I joined PowerGen in 1996 to work as a combustion engineer, and I worked on, well, initially it was all coal combustion that I was working on. There isn't a coal-fired power station left in the UK now, so and I think about the pain and the toil and the tears that I shed trying to sort out some of the things on those coal-fired power stations, and there were a lot of other people far more experienced and far more capable doing the same thing on those, and now they're all gone. So you get that all of that effort and time and investment that was being made, but that's because life has moved on, and absolutely right, because that's been part of our way of saying, how do we solve this problem of climate change? But also what that means is that people employed in that sector, there aren't those jobs there anymore.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
people have had to be able to move to different things. So there's an element in there of being able to be flexible in what you do and being able to change as the system changes. And I think also being resilient and not giving up at the first time you don't get where you want to get to, because the implication of all that change is that jobs come and go. So you'll one of the challenges I think we've got in getting people to engage in being part of the energy system and think of the energy system as a career is that if you're in school or even at university and you look at where the jobs are and you hear about lots of redundancies, you think, oh, well, the jobs aren't there. And then, one of the other places that I think has been recruiting a lot in recent times has been in the renewable sector. So, particularly offshore renewables. So it's interesting to see that. But in terms of the CDT I'm involved with there, in that sector, we still have quite a few of the research come into that centre because they want to effectively retrain to get into the offshore renewable
Got you.
sector,
Yeah.
and you can't, it's quite hard to directly enter into that sector, but that route of doing that training then positions them to do it. um, and I think that's one of the other values of a CDT, because you finish up building your network among the stakeholders who need that capability. You come out of the CDT with people you can talk to about where you go next in your career. You're not going on the milk round. You're not going for every graduate post you can find. You're targeting conversations with people directly, and that's what, certainly whenever I'm talking to people in those CDTs about what they're going to do at the end of their projects. So I encourage them to do all the way through, build your network, build those contacts, because that's where your next job's coming from. If you're writing hundreds of letters, you've missed an opportunity, really, because your
Mm.
opportunity, unless you decide actually this sector is not for me. In which case, fine. I mean, great, you've learnt that on the way through. But if it is for you, you should have been building your network so that you can just go to that. You have your net. All of my job changes. I joined. I guess I joined PowerGen on a graduate scheme, but it was quite a targeted. It was the only graduate scheme I went for. But and my background was combustion engineering in the
Yeah.
university, so it was an obvious shoe in.
Right.
Um, but every job change I've had since then has been based on my network, not based on me applying to lots of people.
Wow.
So
Wow. Oh,
um,
good.
is that
Yeah. No,
that's
that's
gone
spot
very
on. Yeah.
much down some recruitment angle? Is it? Is that
No, but I think
covered this?
that's. I mean that's really valuable. I'll take us into a different angle then.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Sure.
if you mentioned the start of your career, it was it 96. If you were starting your career today, or if there was a what would he be, 21-year-old Mike Colechin going into the energy system now, what advice would you give him?
So, so I started my career a bit before '96. I wasn't 21 in '96. I'm not
Right,
going to tell you
poor
how old I
Martin, my
was,
bad. No, 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 it's fine.
but I started my career on the railway. So
Okay.
back in those days, you could be sponsored as an undergrad, and I was, and I started my career on the railway. So I did my sort of training as an engineer on the railway, and then did a PhD because my options on the railway were ones of either going into project management or operational management. And I wanted to do some what I saw as real engineering for a bit longer. And I saw doing a PhD as an opportunity to do some real engineering. And at the time I was interested in internal combustion engines, and I got a PhD playing with an internal combustion engine for 4 years. So I was very happy. um, but at the end of that time, I don't. I'm reflecting on the decisions I made at those times because I've never looked back on them and thought they were the wrong decisions. So
Mm,
I don't think I would tell the 26-year-old Mike Colchin to have done anything different from what he did. Um, but my decision at that point was, I looked at the car industry, which I could have stayed in. That on that same principle that I had a network within the automotive industry, I could have pursued that. Uh,
mm,
but I didn't want to because I didn't see, at the time it was we didn't, people knew about climate change, but it wasn't the thing in the consciousness of society as a whole. That came a few years after I joined PowerGen, but knew about emissions, knew that emissions were an issue, and the emissions I would worry about in those days were, CO, NOx. When I got into the power sector, SOx, the sulfur emissions, particulates. Those were the things that, as engineers working in combustion, we were trying to solve, and I saw that I could make more difference to those things that I saw as a need for us to resolve as a society by working in the power sector than I could by working in the automotive sector, to which, to my men, just wanted to sell more cars and would do whatever they needed to do to sell as many cars as they could. So I didn't really see it as solving the problem. So that was the 26-year-old principled engineer that I was, and that drove me to do what I did, and then things and I people talk about having a plan for their careers and knowing. I've never had a plan for where I'm going longer term, other than some ideas. So I always had this idea that I wanted to have my own business, and here I am
mm.
today doing that. I always wanted to be an engineer, and I've still argued that I am an engineer, although the amount of actual engineering I do is sort of relatively limited nowadays. Um, I Yeah, and that opportunity, just taking those opportunities as they've
Mm,
come along, and it is working in the area I work in now is so fulfilling because you
mm.
can see the things you're doing on a day-to-day basis make a difference. I mean, yesterday I was down presenting some work. So I said earlier on that I circled back to working on biomass again. Just this year, I've been doing a big project looking at the role biomass can have within the energy system, and the challenges it has had, but also trying to position uh, biomass to be recognised for its energy storage capabilities. So
Mm.
there's a lot of biomass being used in the system currently, but it's used on a what I would call a baseload basis. So
Mm.
that the plant that use biomass are trying to maximise their throughput all the time. So maximise the amount of production they get from the amount of biomass coming in. A lot of them store that biomass. So if you're an anaerobic digestion system, for instance, and you're harvesting crops that you then put in a clamp, you're storing that energy for a whole year and then just
Mm.
running it through at the maximum throughput that the plant can give. So there's this big store of energy there, and that store of energy in total within the system is about 160 terawatt hours, which isn't enough to run the whole energy system by any means. But it is of the scale that you need to solve some of the problems we've got with the variable
Intermittency.
use of renewables and some of the
Yeah.
long duration storage challenge we've got in the system now. And we've done this piece of work to explore whether that could be something that could be taken further. And I think the conclusion we've drawn from that is yes, it can. We've done that by engaging with a whole bunch of stakeholders around the issues that are pertinent to that. And yesterday I was down presenting that to the research councils, to UKRI, and talking to them about how we could take that work forward. I'm out to Japan next week as part of a group from the UK, presenting that to something called RD20, which was it's an international engagement between members of the G20 looking at the research and development that's going on to
Mm.
support the solutions to climate change. I've also presented, or myself and the colleague who's been working on that piece of work, we've presented the work to government, so to people undertaking a review on greenhouse gas removal within government. So it feels like I'm on the cutting edge of making a difference to the way the system's operating,
Mm.
and here I am, a small 2-bit company, but because of the history and because of the network and the
Mm.
things that I've done in the past, I'm able to
Yeah.
engage at that level, and that's really, it feels like you're able to be part of making a difference to what we're trying to
Yeah.
achieve.
Bro, so you're making a difference. You found work that you've enjoyed, and you've got there from taking the opportunities that have come to you. And I think the big take home message there is a lot of that's come from your network and your experience as well. So keep developing the network. They'll present opportunities. Take the ones that will take you in the right direction. Maybe don't have a plan, but take you in the right direction towards doing something that you really enjoy. And I think that's
And the enjoy bit, have fun. I
yeah,
think that's the other. If you're
yeah.
not having fun, then why bother?
Yeah. It's a long
Albeit
time in
it's
my
a
career.
really serious issue we're trying to address,
Yeah.
and yes, some days working in this sector you do get depressed. There's no two ways about it. But there's some great people out there,
Mm.
and a lot of and there are a lot of people out there who are also trying to work on these issues, and resolve them. And I take a lot of I don't know what the word is, pleasure from, not pleasure. I take a lot of reassurance. It
Yeah.
reassures me that. And that's one of the other things I really like about working with CDTs and
Mm.
with research engineers who are undertaking their studies as part of CDTs, is that it also gives you faith that there are other people out there in the next generation who are as committed to solving these problems as I am, and you see the quality of what they can do, and you see how that's all being taken forward by them, and you think, maybe they're going to do a better job than we've done at it. So yeah, it's very reassuring.
Well, that's really optimistic. I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. If people want to, if people want to get in touch or learn more about what you do or keep up to date with your work, where can they get in touch?
Probably the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. I've got quite a distinctive surname. There aren't many of us around, so yeah, Mike Colechin. On if you look for me on LinkedIn, you'll find me there.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll link it in the episode notes so everyone will be able to find you and ask you lots of questions about your interactive workshops.